We are Dave Ollinger, who's on the call with me, and I'm Phil Badham, and we are both from Learning Designer Pro. We are both educators, teachers, and educational technologists. So Dave has a lot to do with Microsoft. He's also led Showcase schools. I'm also do a lot of work around pedagogy, visible learning, consultancy, but working in digital creativity for a long, long time. We're really thrilled about the fact that Canva has acquired Affinity. If you're new to Affinity or you're not sure about what Affinity is basically free digital creativity apps which are industry standard, and they are Photo 2, Publisher 2, and Designer 2, all of which do different things. So for instance, Photo 2 is more about digital image editing, Publisher gives you the opportunity for digital and print publishing, and Designer is more about the sort of vector graphics tools for things like digital illustration and scalable artwork. And so those three on their own provide huge amounts of functionality to creative designers, but of course they're also now going to be available very soon for free for education users, which is an incredible thing, which we'll come on to in a moment. Because one of the things is, why would you choose Affinity if you're working in a school or you're in an educational institution? And predominantly the fact that it's going to be free is a massive, massive draw. But it wouldn't be a massive draw if it wasn't up to scratch. And the great thing about Affinity is that if you've been using more expensive alternatives in this sort of space, then you're going to be hugely pleased by the fact that Affinity gives you massive amounts of power for your students to be able to work on at a professional level, to begin to acquire the skills and the workflows and the techniques that they would need to be in an industry space working with these sorts of tools. So it really is a massive deal that Affinity is going to be freely available. And I think, Dave, you're going to pop into the chat there the link so that you can join the waitlist to get those, to get onto the wait list to have Affinity once it's going to be made available for those schools. And even now, you know, it is available as a free 6-month trial as well to any user. So it's there, it's in front of us, and it's really worth getting your hands on to see what it can do. We'll be having a little bit of a look in a moment. I'm going to give you a few quick demos, the sorts of things that it can do, show the intuitivity of the web, of the interface as well, and how familiar it might be to those of you who've worked in similar products. The way that Dave and I are sort of positioning this, and the way that we see it as educators and how we work with industry standard tools, is that, you know, you've got Canva, which provides you with this incredible space where you can work with templates, you can build from massive libraries of graphics and designs, you've got lots of customization options. But there comes a point when, as a Canva user, perhaps you've used it throughout your K-12 career, but then when you get to the end of K-12, and you might have students who want to go that extra mile, and they want to start to learn not just about how you remove a background, but literally the techniques behind that, about layering, about transparencies, about selections. If they want more control over their creative designs, they need to come out of that sort of hand-holding environment into something where they have more customization and creativity. So it's high school in the US specifically, it might be CTE teachers who are working with students in authentic scenarios where they're making board games or they're designing logos, where they need that little bit more customization rather than generic libraries. And so it really is a sort of natural, we see it as a sort of natural progression or a natural movement across the spectrum of using these digital tools. And it's that mastery really of doing it. We've got AI that's come in. We're doing a session on AI very shortly. But AI tools can sometimes, if they're there too quickly in the design process, they can take away some of those creative mistakes that we need to make, or those creative iterations that we need to make too. So one of the great things about using something like Affinity is that some of those generative AI things that are up front and center in some other alternative pieces of software aren't there, and that's a good thing because you're getting stuck into that design interface right from the beginning. And that means we don't bypass some of those virtuous mistakes that we make in the creative process too. But what we've also got the opportunity, if we're using Affinity, is that we can give students authentic briefs, authentic assignments, and get them to use an authentic workspace to actually build those out. So as you can see, you might prototype something in Canva, and then you might iterate it in something like Affinity. So there are easy ways of going backwards and forwards between these two packages. So I'm going to give you a little quick guide in a moment to Affinity Publisher. I'm going to take you in there. We're going to have a little look at some of the use cases. We're going to make the slide deck available to you afterwards with some sort of need to know. What are the sort of things that as educators might want to know about Publisher in order to be interested in it? So the fact that we call it a page layout application as opposed to digital publishing, because we can do print outputs, we can do digital outputs. Okay, let's dive into Publisher and have a little look. So as I said, Publisher is a space where we can build out publications, whether they're for print or whether they're for digital purposes. And what I've got one here, this was actually done whilst I was out in Denver for ISTE recently. I just knocked this up probably about an hour in Affinity Publisher 2. Inspired by Union Station in Denver. But the reason I did this was to think about how students might be able to use, and the similar sort of work that I've done with students using publishing tools a little bit like Affinity. And it's great because what Affinity does is it allows us to control larger documents. We can do everything from leaflets to books. We've got a greater range of customization of page sizes, print outputs, and we're actually working spaces which are designed for professional printing. So I'm just going to show you how I might quickly mock something out of this, and you can see some of the key tools that we've got within Publisher 2. So I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to go to my new document panel here. I've got a letter setup, so US letter size, 4 pages, because when we're printing, we need it always in multiples of 4. I've also got the ability to add bleeds. Now, if you're working with print publishing and you want your papers cut by a professional printer, students need to know about bleeds, because when you're using color in publications, your color needs to come out from outside the page end so that when it's cut, you don't get any white lines. So you've immediately got lots of ways in which you can control more advanced level of customization. So we're going to keep that, and we're going to go to Create. And then you can see how I've got 4 pages, including a middle page spread, which I'm going to start to build out my little project here. So if a student was doing something like this, perhaps they're a geography student, they've been doing looking at different cities, and maybe they're putting together a project or an information guide about a particular country. Let's get going. So we're going to use the place on the file menu, and this is really where you start to put in all your elements onto the workspace. I'm going to choose my Union Station picture, and you can see how I can start to build this out. And you can see how the image is going directly from the outside of the page into the bleed area, where we're making sure that our color, if we're professionally printing this, will not give us white lines. So very easy to place elements onto the page here. And I'm just going to use down the left-hand side. So again, if you've used any other digital publishing tools, you'll be quite familiar with the way in which this is arranged in what I call like an N frame. So we've got our tools down the left-hand side, we've got our properties along the top, and we've got our panels down the right as well. So just quickly build out a little area here and fill it. There you go. And this is going to be where my text is going to go. And I'm just going to bring that opacity down so that we can see the background between it. We'll just tuck those to the end. And this is now we've done the basic bit, we're going to have a look at some of the text capabilities that are specific to these publishing tools. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm just going to draw out. I could place a Word document directly in. As you can see, it's dropped the text into there. Now, one of the things if you're working a professional publishing space like this is, typically if you weren't working in this space, you would have to move this text into different columns. What I want my columns to do are to relate to each other across a spread of pages. So down here, you can see where that little red box is there. That indicates the text is overset. If I click that and then just drag a new text box onto the side here, you can see how it's bringing the rest of the text into the page. I'm just going to turn that opacity up a little bit more. There we go. Now, if I make any adjustments to any one of these columns here, you can see how it adjusts the other column. And that means you could have page 1 or page 20 and columns on those different pages. And it wouldn't matter what adjustments you're making, it will automatically update in the columns that are related to it. So we can see that this column is related by this line all the way up to the top. Now, one of the last cool things I'm going to show you is, again, something you might struggle to do in a more generic platform is wrap around an image. So I'm just going to go to place. I'm going to drop in this one here, and I'm just going to build this picture out to the edge of my page. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the text around this. So I'm going to choose edge, and you can see there that I can then wrap the text around the edge of that image. Okay, so I can wrap my text around complex images. So what we're seeing here is we've got much more of a complex set of tools that we can use in something like Affinity Publisher 2, when we need to go a little bit more complex or a little bit more sophisticated in terms of design. So that's just a little bit of a quick preview of the sorts of things that you can do in Affinity Publisher 2. You can see that we've got various pages. We've got all the page panels down here where we can add pages in and out, etc., etc. Very familiar with other tools that you may have used before. Now, if you are thinking of different use cases that you're talking to schools about, or you want to, what sort of things you might do with students. These are some of the projects that we've done in the past using Publisher 2 or equivalents. We've got informative publications, we've got research project work, getting students to produce their own school prospectuses or even their own newsletters and programs, and also the perennial portfolios, CVs and resumes. Dave, you've done a lot of work with students around digital publishing. What sort of things have you done, or you've seen the students do with a digital publishing package like this?
Well, over the years, I've seen a lot of yearbooks being made with these digital publishing packages, and then posters, advertisements. When I was in the classroom teaching English, I would often have students create their portfolios using different services. But if a student really wanted to challenge themselves, I gave them access to a digital publishing software where they could go into real depth and make sometimes even interactive files with this. So it's a really useful tool in the classroom.
Okay, so moving on, because we haven't got a huge amount of time today, but let's have a quick look at Affinity Designer. So Affinity Designer is ultimately if you want to be doing vector graphics. So let's say, for instance, you are in a CTE class and that you are looking at creating a logo. Now, you might be able to use various shapes in other packages, and you might be able to use libraries of pre-created logos or even use AI, but you'll never ever be able to get the same sort of customization you might need to meet a client's brief specifically. So again, if you're working at the higher end of K-12 and you're trying to get your students into more authentic works, assignments and assessments, and you want them to have that experience of what it might be to be given a brief and to do something with it, then Affinity Designer will be a space that's very, very familiar to those of you that may have used other similar tools. So it is a vector graphics tool. So we are working predominantly with paths, which means that all the images we create can be scaled. If you're talking to teachers and students about it, they need to know that it's pretty intuitive to use. We have lessons built in to Designer 2 as well, and it's a very resourceful learning environment. Lots of things that you can bring in, add-ons that you can use to help you with that. So what I'm going to do is very quickly bring up Designer, and I'm going to try and create, in the time that we've got, some Olympic rings to show you, because the Olympic rings might be something you could create, let's say in Canva, but it'd be very, very difficult to do in terms of trying to get the rings to interlock like they do in the original Olympics logo. And this is where something like Affinity Designer 2 would be able to help us out because of its shape building tools. So I'm just going to select this circle here. I'm going to draw myself a circle. So let's just make sure. Actually, let's turn that off. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to build out a circle, and then I'm just going to copy that. Then I'm going to just build in a second circle in the middle using my duplicate tool. And from there, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to basically pull it across and make it. Now you can see when we're working here that you've got all these snap guides coming in that help me to make sure that my rings are exactly the right space apart. And I'm going to do a couple more to the ones down here. And you can see how those green lines give me perfect centrality. It's helping me with all the positioning of these rings to make sure that I get them right. So once I'm happy with them, and I've got them. I'm basically ready to go with the interlocking. So with the rings that interlock, first of all, I'm going to select all of these rings. And then over here on the left-hand side, you can see something called the Shape Builder tool. So if I click on that Shape Builder tool, this is really the essence of working in graphic design. So when we work in graphic design, a lot of the time we're building up graphics using different shapes. We're merging them, subtracting them, knocking them out from each other until we get what we want. So I'm going to essentially bring this over here and I'm going to draw through the shapes that I want to merge. I'm going to hit the return key and that's now merged those together. I'm then going to come down and do this one, merge those together, and then these and merge those together. And I'll continue on with this one. This is exactly how it should be in the proper Olympic Rings logo. And I'll just continue on over here as well. Till we've got the conjoined rings. So there I've got my rings and I've interlocked them together and I've used my Shape Builder tool. Now all I would need to do is to go in and start to colorize those individual shapes, and I'll give them the correct fill color. So there's the first blue ring, and then I'll obviously move on to my next ring over here. Okay, click inside, and then this one is a red, and vice and so on and so on. So you can see here that, and then you'll see how the interlocking works. Let's just pick up, just in case I've missed any interlocks. I think there's actually one down there that I've missed, so I'm just going to make sure that's completed. There we go. And then you'll see the interlocking in a moment when I do the yellow. Okay. And you can see then how the interlocking and the colors are now forming around those. And so I would then go through. But what we've got there, you can see that this is, those sort of interlocking shapes would be very, very difficult to do using generic libraries of shapes. You need something like Affinity Designer to be able to get that sort of complexity and that sort of customization that you need when you're working with graphic design. And of course, because we're working with vectors, all of this is completely scalable. It will never lose its freshness. It will never lose its fine lines because we're working with paths as opposed to pixels. Okay, so that's basically Designer, and you can see there's a pretty easy interface to use. You've got everything on your right with the colors, you've got your layers, and you can see that as you move from individual parts of the Affinity suite, that everything is using the toolbars on the left, panels on the right, properties are at the top, and these interfaces are very familiar and easy to work with. So in terms of use cases for graphic design, we've got a few here that we've worked with in the past with schools with graphic design. Dave, this is your one, isn't it, on the emojis and icons? Do you want to talk us a little bit about what the students doing here in your school?
I'd like to point out that I think that this specific designer is going to be maybe it's maybe more complex, might feel a little more intimidating, but I want to assure you we have students here working in Designer, learning how to make these vector graphics. You'll see the image here of a student creating emojis using a design tool. And one of the things that is really helpful here is this is a student in a class that's teaching about emotions, about the kind of the subtlety of emotions, and he's having his students create their own emojis, their own graphics using a vector design tool. And they got to learn some design skills in addition to the content learning, and that was a really engaging and exciting lesson for those students, different than what they're used to.
I mean, there's a whole different way in which you can, when you're doing graphic design with students, whether they're doing it in order to learn the principles of design, because when you're doing graphic design, you're thinking about reduction, you're thinking about simplicity, you're thinking about bringing complex parts into a unified whole. So it's not just about the fact of learning how to use these tools. When you learn to use these tools, you need to learn the rudiments, the theory behind it. And everything that you do within design thinking and the principles of design is all part and parcel of learning critical thinking, of learning processes for thinking better. So it all fires back to student agency as well, and getting them to feel that they are learning tricks and tips and techniques that will see them well into the workplace as well. So again, if you're a US CTE teacher, you'll be thinking about that sort of workplace readiness, which is part and parcel of it. And it's only by using tools which are used in the workplace or used for professional that they'll get a sense that we can do this, that we've got these skills as we move, and we don't have to learn them once we move into those particular workplaces. And finally, we're going to have a little think about Affinity Photo 2. So this is your digital image editing environment provided by Affinity. And what it gives you, again, is this ability to do much more complex masking and layering. So if you can use edit background or background remover in Canva, you're already aware of masking and layering, but you may not understand necessarily how it works or how it happens. What you can start to do once you start working in something like Photo 2 is begin to get more sophisticated level of masking. You can start to do refined masking of things like hair. You can start to do composite images which use multiple points of masking and layering and blend modes. You've got everything that you would need as a professional photographer, such as raw engines. But not only that, but most students, I find, something like digital image editing is a desirable skill set. It's something that everybody wants to learn, the ability to manipulate images. So let's have a quick look at Photo 2, and let's bring that up. Now, what I've got here is an example, which is an example that I did with a school in London. And what happened here was that this school were doing this art and photography class, and they were working on Robert Rauschenberg's Rebus work. So they were thinking about, and just to give you an example, so here's a Rauschenberg image, and they were studying Rauschenberg's technique and his use of montage. And these students were going off to a trip to Paris. And they were going to take photographs. It was like, well, when they came back from that, what could they do with them? So we thought, well, let's see if they can do some montage work by using digital techniques to replicate what Robert Rauschenberg did with his Rebus montages. And so this is one of the ones that we created. And you'll see in a moment just how simple it is to start to build up and use layers to create something of this sort of montage effect. And you can do that also, if you're doing a sort of cover poster for a theatre production or something like that. But let's go to New, and let's go to Create, and let's place my first image, which is this one of Venice. I'm just going to drop that onto the page and pull that on. And then I'm also going to create a duplicate of this as well underneath. And then for this one, I'm going to give a black and white image adjustment. This is what we call non-destructive editing. And if I just switch that layer off, you can see that I've got a black and white version now of that image by using this non-destructive adjustment layer. And again, anyone who's ever used other alternatives will recognize all of these terms and all of these different tools. So having created that, I'm then going to open a new image, which is this sandpaper. And I'm going to just very quickly mask it. So I'm going to take away the background using my flood fill tool. And you can see the checkerboard up here, which indicates the transparency. And I'm just going to take that, copy it, and then go back to my image and paste that onto the page. So it should be up here somewhere. There it is. Size it down. And then I'm just going to spin it onto the page here. Now, if we're thinking about the sort of quality of masking that we can do in Photo 2, which we might not be able to do anywhere else, we've got masking and frames within Canva, which is absolutely fantastic. But as I said, maybe we're moving on towards wanting to do some more sophisticated masking and layering. If I just move this color version of the Venice layer onto that background, you've got an instant mask so that that looks like it. And then I could apply a special effects to this. I'll apply a effect to the background. Oops. And I'm just going to add in an outer shadow. Turn that up a little bit. You should see that shadow appearing to give it that sort of sense of texture and depth, which is what we want from a montage like Robert Rauschenberg. So I've got that drop shadow on there, giving that little bit of sense of depth. And the final thing I'm going to do is to show you how I might use layering and blend modes just to start to build up some texture in this image. So I'm just going to drag on a texture, this sort of grungy texture, and then I'm going to use blend modes now to get that texture working for me as I move through. So let's go for that overlay one there. And you can see there that I've started to build up some more texture so it looks quite painterly. And then it's just a question of building on other parts onto it as well. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of how you might build up something like that image there. So just a sort of quick guide to how easy and quick it is to use some of the tools within those 3 parts of the Affinity suite. And again, you know, when we're looking at our use case gallery here, you've got all sorts of great ways in which you can use these tools with students for creating composites, cover designs, or just going really creative with their artistic endeavors. And this is actually what happened. These students who came back from Paris with all their pictures, they had 2 hours learning how to do this layering, and then they produced some of these images for their work and actually won a competition off the back of that. And it was only off the back of 2 or 3 hours of learning how to do some of those layering techniques. So students are really given the power and the tools to do some really creative things once they've got that, and they're often, they don't see it as being difficult. They're just happy to learn it, happy to play, happy to experiment and see what they can do by pressing buttons. So before we go, we've got I said 3 takeaways there, but I added a sneaky 4th one while Dave wasn't looking. The Affinity Studio is freely available for schools, or will be very shortly. Do please register. Dave will put in the link again into the chat. The way we see as educators Affinity is that natural extension of moving from all the great design knowledge that you have got from using Canva and all the amazing things that Canva can do. But when you need that customization, that professional level of customization, and the underlying skills and tools at your disposal to know what you need to do and when, it's the natural movement point, drop-off point into the Affinity tools. So the fact that you've got Canva, okay, and you've got Affinity together just gives you the entire gamut of everything that you need to create professional digital outputs. It's really exciting. We're really excited, hence why we wanted to share this with you today. And of course, the other thing, the last one there, is that Affinity is a familiar environment for students working in other programs. So if you were going to be making a switch, then they would find themselves very, very quickly able to transfer themselves across into those environments, because they are familiar and they are as fully featured. So we've got a couple of minutes. We may just be over time here, but if you've got any questions, you'd like to stay on the webinar for a little bit longer, if you've got any questions that you want to ask us, please do pop that into the chat now. Again, Dave's got the link there for you. Register your interest for Affinity. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do at Learning Designer Pro for sessions for your school, your district, or even your companies, please do contact us on that email address. You'll be getting a form as well, just to give you a quick evaluation at the end of this. Dave and I are also very keen on offering courses on Affinity. So we've got some Educator Essentials ones that are available. We'll give you a few hours worth of what we've just had a sneak peek at today. And we also just want to point out that everything that we do in terms of use cases and work with students and teachers is based on pedagogy. It's based on what works in the classroom, and we are very much aligns ourselves with the Universal Design for Learning, if that's a framework that you are familiar with. So thank you very much. We will be sending out the form. Dave, if you want to find out a little bit more about our courses, then do please visit us on the website. So it's learningdesignerpro.com, and you will find lots of information about our Canva courses, our Affinity courses, okay, and our Microsoft courses as well. So thank you ever so much. I know it's a very sort of quick burst for 30 minutes, but I hope that's given you a little bit of a guide about where we see Affinity fitting in to your creative classroom outputs. So